sorry about that. I don't know what happened.
We thought we'd upset you and we hadn't even started, Tim, so welcome back, mate. So, Tim, for our half an hour that we have with you, mate, could you just, for the purposes of Hansard, just let us know who you are and in what capacity you're appearing?
My name is Tim Squires and I'm now a semi-retired casual school bus driver. Been associated with the transport industry one way or another since the mid-70s.
So what we'll do, Tim, is I'm going to invite you now to tell us what you need us to hear, please, mate.
Okay, I'll give you a little bit of history first, Glenn, if that's all right.
Please do.
I commenced my working life as an apprentice motor mechanic. Also worked within the veneer and plywood, the hotel industry and casual driving jobs, eventually coming to rest permanently in the transport industry in 1976. I say coming to rest very much tongue-in-cheek, as there were very few people I came across in the industry who would fit that state. During my time, I was privileged to hold down many different and varied roles, local driving, long-distance driving. I was given the opportunity, following a back injury, to go into sales, which led to country depot management, major depot operations management, subsequent state, national, general management roles with some major and some not so major players within the industry. At one stage, even served as an elected driver union delegate. I served on the board of the Queensland Trucking Association for 11 years, four of which were as president. Also, during those 4 years, I was a member of the Australian Trucking Association's General Council, board member for 2 years, Queensland president of the Australian Road Transport Industrial Organisation, and a national vice president. 2007, mainly due to family reasons, I quit the corporate environment, bought a couple of trucks, and my wife and I embarked on our own venture, being local distribution work for a national warehousing company in Brisbane. We were given the opportunity to grow over the next 6 years to the point where we were running 18 vehicles across 3 different work sites in both the local distribution and long-distance sectors, and which we were eventually forced to liquidate given the failure of our major customer. I offer this explanation simply to demonstrate that, as the saying goes, I've certainly come up through the industry. Probably never enjoyed it as much as I do at the moment. In December 2009, I was invited by then Deputy Prime Minister. I thought we'd gone Republican then. I was invited by then Deputy Prime Minister Julia Gillard to join the Safe Rates Advisory Group, which SRAG, the first meeting of which was held on December 16th, 2009. Purpose of which was to advise the Australian Government in the preparation of a detailed policy paper, setting out practical national strategies and detailed options for national legislation to address the safety issues facing the transport industry and to present these to government. I seem to recall that these meetings were held over a period up until May or June 2010. In October 2011, Leader of the Government in the Senate, Senator Chris Evans, invited further attendance at a reformed SRAG to assist with key policy, legislation and implementation issues related to the government's proposed response to the NTC report released in 2008 entitled Safe Payments, Addressing the Underlying Issues of Unsafe Practices in the Road Transport Industry. 28th of June 2012, I was one of 4 industry members, along with 4 judicial members, appointed by the Governor-General, Quentin Bryce, to the Road Safety Remuneration Tribunal, supposedly for a period of 5 years from that date of appointment. All 4 industry appointees shared a passion and dedication in seeing that everyone that works within the road transport sector gets a fair go and is able to make a reasonable living. This was especially so in my case, as in all 3 of these groups, I was the only player with actual skin in the game. That is to say, the only one who actually parted the dollars to employ people and run trucks. The makeup of the groups contained union reps, legal people, human resources and IR people, major road transport customers and CEOs of industry associations. This was disconcerting to me as the single owner-operator representative. I felt that I had a responsibility to ensure that, to the best of my ability, any proposed legislation needed to, quite simply, and I have been listening this morning, so this might hit home to a couple of you, I'd quite simply be the mechanism by which all players in the supply chain, regardless of size, were given the opportunity to be heard if their business were forced into the situation of having to operate in an unsafe manner due to poor remuneration or payment methodology of any other party within the supply chain. The legislation simply needed to be the playing field leveller. The situation remained until such time as we got the consultation and facilitated discussion process. There I found that there was a small dedicated group of drivers, both contractors and company employed, who were also to have input into the proposed RSRT orders. In my opinion, the process was somewhat flawed. Right through the consultative process, there was very little actual operator involvement from large transport companies and or industry associations. The small regular driver group were generally faced across the table by a very large group of legal people, major transport users and industry association IR people, who I felt believed it was their job to stifle the process and delay any outcomes as long as they possibly could. Despite all of this, the consultative process also managed to yield some good results. The TWU had employed the resources of a Mr. Singh, who was the principal of a company called Transeco, which was involved in producing and updating regular industry costings. Driver Working Group and I were given the opportunity to work with Mr. Singh, and we were also able to make him aware of the costing model that had been used and enhanced by the working group. This costing model was also used and shared with a number of people and groups over a 2-week period and was generally seen as appropriate, transparent and understandable. I do believe that we were let down badly by the KPMG costings that were attached to the proposed bill. In my opinion, the rate structure was wrong, and in that it attempted to apply a vehicle running rate and a standing rate at the same time, so essentially double dipping with the chargeable rate. I also feel that these KPMG costings were the main cause of contention in the final attempts to get the bill approved and led to the unceremonious sacking of the tribunal by the ill-informed and true-stretching dynamic duo of Malcolm Turnbull and Michaela Cash. The Road Safety Remuneration Bill should be examined for its legality. The Road Safety Remuneration Repeal Bill should be examined for its legality. In a May 3rd, 2016 report issued by the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights states, and I quote, "The repeal bill was introduced to the House of Representatives and the Senate on April 18, 2016, receiving royal assent on April 19, 2016, and becoming the Road Safety Remuneration Repeal Act 2016. As such, the committee was unable to consider the bill before its passage through Parliament." This report goes on to suggest, A, 1.28, by abolishing the RSRT and repealing the orders, the RSR Repeal Act engages and limits the right to just and favourable conditions of work by removing the minimum protections provided by the RSRT and its orders. At 1.31, in terms of the financial impact of the orders, little information is provided in the statement of compatibility to explain and provide evidence to support the statement that the orders would have a negative impact on the road transport industry, particularly on the viability of owner-driver and small transport operators. The statement of compatibility explains that overwhelmingly the industry, including owner-drivers and small road transport business, oppose the orders, but does not provide a detailed description of those stakeholders nor their particular interest in the orders. At 1.44, as set out above, the RSR Repeal Act engages and limits the right to just and favourable conditions of work. The statement of compatibility does not fully justify that limitation for the purposes of international human rights law. The committee therefore seeks the advice of the Minister for Employment as to, 1, the objective to which the proposed changes are addressed and why they address a pressing and substantial concern, 2, the rational connection between limitation on rights and that objective, and 3, reasons why the limitation is a reasonable and proportionate measure for the achievement of that objective. Obviously, these points were never responded to, and I finished the quote. Obviously, these points were never responded to as the repeal had already been enacted, so Turnbull and Cash, in their disregard of parliamentary procedure and based on a meeting with drivers in Canberra, supposedly 200 to 300, primed with standard format lies and letters distributed by their associations, most of whose operators never attended a single facilitative session. The lie was continued by the comment that 30,000 subcontractors were in fear that would be out of work. Where were these 30,000? Where were the submissions? Where was the consultation with any members of the tribunal? This whole process was an absolute disgrace the government should be ashamed of. 4 industry members unceremoniously dumped, contracts not paid out, no further correspondence. Why are all the same issues still being raised in the industry on a regular basis? Turnbull and his attack minister were unable to win the building industry watchdog that they wanted, so as a consequence they adopted soft target of the RSRT and cost the whole industry, big players, small players, subcontractors and the mum and dad businesses that perform 80 to 85% of the freight task, the best chance the industry, big players and small players alike, ever had to get itself on track. The right payments allow maintenance to be done, allow drivers to be paid the right money, ensures fatigue regulations do not have to be ignored, and ensures that everyone who has a right to a reasonable living actually achieves it. If structured correctly, the RSRT should have had its own set of teeth instead of reliance on Fair Work to audit and ensure that orders were adhered to.
That's right.
Any future attempt at the formation of a formal consultative relationship between the road transport industry and levels of government in Australia needs to seriously consider the makeup of industry representatives. One only needs to consider the membership of organisations such as the Australian Logistic Council, the ATA, NatRoad and others, suggesting that they represent subcontractors in the industry as a whole. At the big end of the town, where are the actual operators? The industry is unfortunately a price taker, not a price setter. So who are the price setters? Who are the biggest users of transport in this country? Who are the biggest users of subcontractors in this country? How much would it really cost the economy to get the rates right, stop the death and destruction on the roads, ensure that people get home safely and earn a reasonable living as reward for their hard work? We can get all of this right, and we might find transport industry becoming an industry of choice for new participants, and that includes females, Glenn. Yep. The only other point I wish to make is one relative to Phoenix activity. This activity is rife within the transport industry and has been for many years. The cost of Phoenix activity to the economy, industry participants and suppliers who are unfortunate enough to be caught by criminals who indulge in these activities is enormous. The law relative to these people is far too soft. Why should someone have the ability to walk away from their debts, put numerous suppliers and service providers out of business, and then buy back their business from receivers and be back up and operating again within a week of the receivers being called in? Graham Gardner and I put together a very comprehensive file on such a case following Minister Kelly O'Dwyer's first mention of Phoenix activity and the cost to the economy in Parliament. The case involved Wet Mills Transport and associated entities and was exactly as described above. The event occurred in January of 2013 after having been carefully planned by an insolvency consultant. The file was sent in October 2017. This is the file I sent. The file was sent in October 2017 to the Minister, Shadow Ministers, selected Senators and ASIC. ASIC did not want to know about it, even though we had done all the required searches with dates and all associated companies and links to other entities. The 6 politicians it was sent to received only a single reply from the officer of Senator Katie Gallagher. She was then caught up in the citizenship affair and communication stopped. I was assured by a couple of senators that it would definitely be followed up and I would be informed. It's been a long wait. So, Senators, I wish you luck in your endeavour. Can only hope you're successful as a clean-up of this industry is long overdue. That's it for my statement, Senator.
Tim, thank you so much. And I wanted my colleagues to hear from you because, you know, you laid it all out. You had skin in the game, but you've come through the industry. You've been an industry representative at the highest levels with RTO and ATA. But Tim, I'd like your thoughts on this one, mate. I've held 2 transport industry standard forums in Canberra, attended by over 70 industry representatives, the usual suspects. But can I just say this to you, mate? It is incredible, and I won't go into private conversations, but it's incredible now that I've got You got your seatbelt on, Tim? Listen to this.
Yeah.
The NRFA, Nat Roads, most state organisations, surprise, surprise, except SATA. The livestockies aren't in, and the ATA obviously aren't in, who have all said to me, and divisions of the livestockies in Victoria, that they threw the baby out with the bathwater. And
Absolutely.
And Tim, it's been heartwarming, because you've heard me say there are many people that now they realise that there was, what they did, instead of fixing up the stuff up, just to execute the whole lot over the actions of former Senator, what's the rugby player, who thought he could get re-elected? Lazarus, thank you. Lazarus, who thought he'd be the champion of the trucking industry, who now want to work, and I've facilitated a few meetings with ministers behind the scenes, to start saying, hell, we got that wrong. Does that surprise you, Tim?
Not when all the same issues are still there, Glenn.
That's it, mate. And like I said, I've said many a times, and I've spoken at every industrial, every transport industry conference and safety things. And I've said the same thing. I shut my eyes and I go back 40 years ago when I was a young union delegate at Ansett, mate. You know, apart from fatigue management, which we didn't have in WA, it's all the same friggin' problems still here.
Yep.
And and I do actually, Tim, I actually do believe with the will, because you touched on it, mate. And I have to say this, and I'll say this in front of my colleagues who I've got the greatest respect for, the two colleagues that are here with me today. I don't think the Labor government did a very good job at all. I'm not letting the Labor government off. Because, and I'll say it this way, and you said it, how the hell they thought that they could revamp the transport industry without the involvement of transport operators is beyond me.
Yep.
And it's the basic thing that you and I both learnt when we went into and wanted to be truckies, and you went further up the chain. You've got to bring people with you.
Yep.
So
that's why I was actually devastated with the result, because I was passionate about seeing it right.
I know you were.
I was very disappointed.
Yep. Look, I want to give Senator Hanson and Senator McDonald an opportunity, please.
Senator McDonald, if you want to go. Tim, it's Pauline Hanson here.
Hello, Senator Hanson. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
She's stealing all my voters in this inquiry, the bugger, I can tell you. They're flocking to her.
She's still a Queenslander, Glenn. That's the reason why.
Thank you. Actually, you probably heard my evidence that at that time I wasn't a member of Parliament, but it was brought to my attention about the RSRT. And it was really the owner-drivers that brought it to my attention, the truckies, and they were telling me because they heard about it and asked me, did I hear about it? And I said, no, I didn't. So they informed me. You said that you worked on the board of it. There was 4 of you on the board, is that correct?
Yes.
You were the only one that is an owner-operator that was on the board, and the rest were bureaucrats.
On the RSRT? Yes. Are you talking about, Senator?
Yeah, the RSRT. Yeah,
yes,
you were.
I was. Yeah.
You were involved in that for how many years did you put into that?
Right from the advisory, when the advisory
2011.
Started.
That was about 2011, was it?
No, earlier than that.
2010. 2010.
Yeah, October 2011.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I think 2010, I think we started.
Tim, what was raised with me was the concern that owner-drivers, you're going to restrict them to a price on their cartage. So where that same thing wasn't done with people who had employees. So the way it was presented to me, there was going to be an imbalance. So you were controlling the owner-drivers and what they charged for a job. But if the big companies like Lynn Fox or these other big companies, they weren't being controlled under the same rules. Is that correct?
What we identified, Senator, was that there was a particular section of the industry that really needed to be addressed in a hurry. And that's why I think so much focus was put on the owner-drivers initially. as you heard me say, I regarded the RSRT as in my opinion, I wanted it to be the playing field leveller, and that meant go across all sectors. But you can't do them all at once, and that's why and I'm sure Senator Sterl will back me up in this, in that the owner-driver sector has traditionally, ever since I've been involved in this industry, been misused and abused.
Yep.
By the owner-drivers?
No.
Big companies, but see, that's what I mean. Here you say it is the big companies that have actually undercutting the owner-drivers. And they're actually doing the damage here. But your RSRT were actually targeting the owner-drivers. So you said, OK, you would like to see it right across the board for everyone, but in doing so, you were targeting the owner-drivers first up, and then you would have caused them so much damage to actually open it up for the big companies to have more control of the market share.
If the owner-drivers that you're speaking of had and I'll be blunt, got off their butts and attended some of the sessions we had, they would have found out that certainly wasn't the case.
Right.
Where that eventuated was basically from all the lies and misadvice that was put out by those people that Senator Sterl has just mentioned, those associations that wanted to control everything.
Right. Tim, what you investigated then, what you wanted to introduce then at that time, would you stand by everything that you wanted to do then to this day? Would you change anything?
I'd probably change lots of things, Senator, but I don't know how you'd go about it, because there wasn't. We had very few resources in terms of the RSRT, and I heard a budget figure mentioned by the dynamic duo too that was supposedly budgeted for the RSRT. I can tell you it was nothing like it, because we just didn't have the research. We had a few research facilities or people available to assist, but it was just impossible to attack everything at once.
Yeah.
So, would you want well, what I'm saying is, would you actually then want to see that introduced now? Will that sort of deal with some of the problems that we have today in the transport industry?
Look, I'm sure in a maybe a revamped state, and with a whole lot more owner-operator involvement with the likes of Senator McDonald, who I have known of for a number of years and through various functions. People who understand the industry need to be involved. Don't fill it up with bureaucrats, lawyers, etc.
That's right.
Give us a room full of operators and let us discuss it.
You won't get an argument from me. Also, under this scheme, was there a national transport authority board? So you didn't have all these individual states putting out their own laws, and was it under the one umbrella, the trucking industry?
It was. Yes. At the end of the day, but we also recognise that there were certain areas, and a lot of this applied to rural carriers, livestock association, etc., where those people have traditionally been able to set their own rates, and in that case, good luck to them, But particularly on the eastern seaboard and between the major three states or capitals on the eastern seaboard, it's been a problem for years. It's been a problem for years getting paid the right amount of money. I hate people talking to me about backloading rates. I just turn it off. Because there's no such thing as backloading rate. The truck costs the same amount of money to run north as it does to run south.
Right.
No difference.
Okay.
Don't talk to me about backloading rates.
Tim,
Thanks very much, Tim. Thank you.
Tim, I'm with you all the way. As an ex-owner driver, I never had backloading. We had the same rate because, as I argued, mate, Shell and BP weren't going to give me a 50% reduction in my fuel cost because I was heading back from Darwin. Can I just, Tim, I just want to throw this one at you for your thought. And mate, there are some absolutely wonderful people that I'm now working with in the industry. But what I have said very clearly, I'd taken to the last election and I stood by this. Let's just say it was what I was going to do. I didn't say I had everyone on board, but I said clearly that if there was a change in government and I had the ability to bring the industry back to the table, I had said very, very clearly what an operator, big or small, charges their client is of no business of mine.
Yep.
But what I did say very clearly, where I will have input and we will have legislation with the support of the crossbench, was knock yourself out if you want to run for nothing. But if you engage drivers or you engage subcontractors or you engage other companies, then that's where the government has a role to play. What's your thoughts there, Tim?
It was my experience, Glenn, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but my experience was that over so many years I just witnessed, and I think it was mentioned this morning, there are no barriers to entry in this industry.
Yeah.
I witnessed people coming into this industry had no idea what their costs were, and even to the degree where this was evident in some fairly major players, had no idea what their costs were. If you don't know what your cost is, how the hell do you charge the right rate?
Tim, you're right, but where I was coming from on that angle, see, there was a number of angles, Phil, on that conversation, that line that I was using, and I was determined as long as I was sucking air, I would not rat on that deal, because if an owner-driver has got a client, let's say there's an owner-driver in Bow Desert who's working for the local tractor carrier or whatever, and they have a rate that's less than what Linfox or Tolls charge, but that family business is operating without screwing down drivers, that's their business, no problem. Yep. But I also know, and Tim, this is where you could give us some support on this. If a major transport company was cutting between Brisbane and Melbourne, and they had a part of or a leg of the trip where they were running empty, and they quoted on a contract that put some freight on the back of the primer on the trailers for that leg, as long as they paid their drivers right, that's no business of mine.
No.
And this is what I'd run with the National Road Freighters Association, and I'd said to them very clearly, and I commend the NRFA, because they approached me and said, hey, we're not against being protected, but we didn't like the RSRT. I said, put it behind us. Let's move on. How can we fix it? And for the life of me, the opposition I have, and I don't need to mention, you know where the opposition comes from, and I think to myself very clearly, if we're trying to get an industry, all we're asking for is to be cost recover with a little bit of profit. I'm not talking 100% profit.
That's right.
Some of the major employer groups in this nation running protection rackets against their own good members to turn a blind eye to the rat bags that aren't even paying a basic award.
Yep, exactly.
And I don't get it.
And can I just say, at the end of the day, if you're using subcontractors, and this is why I was so passionate about getting the subcontractor rate right to start. If you're using a subcontractor rate and everyone is being paid the same minimum rate for a particular task, then the only thing the major carrier can argue is the margin that's applied.
Yeah. Senator McDonald.
Mr. Squires, thank you very much for your presentation today. It's been really interesting because you've explained some of that history that I wasn't across. You made a point about if you don't know your costs, how can you set your rates? And it's a point well made. Anyway, that's a battle for another day. I guess then, so you're encouraging this Senate committee to come back with recommendations around getting industry to recommit as a broader group, or it's about the consultation, isn't it? So you can't end up having people saying they're representing 30,000 drivers, but they're potentially not.
Look, can I suggest, Senator, that the way to go initially would certainly be to keep the legal eagles and the CEOs and all the rest of them out of it for starters. Get the operators in the room and at least get agreement out of the operators. That's the way to go.
Yeah, rightio. That's yes. lots of things to say there and none of them appropriate.
Look, we were totally, myself and the operators group that involved young Steve Corcoran and a few other guys, Jerry Brown-Sarr, and yes, our hands were tied. Our hands were tied because we were sitting across the table from just, CEOs, major users of freight organisations, and legal eagles. And this is another question I'd like answered by someone, and I don't know who, but a number of years ago there was a thing introduced called the chain of responsibility. What happened to it?
What was it called? Sorry, what was it called?
Chain of responsibility. Biggest load of bullshit I've ever... Tim, we've been taught, you and I, amongst others, have been talking about the chain of responsibility was going to be the silver bullet to clean up the industry and make our, operators... Yep. What a load of crap. And I don't know, mate, I had a meltdown in the Senate a couple of weeks ago. There's an Indian driver sitting in jail. Now, whether he's Indian or not doesn't matter, but there's a driver, let's just rephrase it. There's a driver sitting in jail in Melbourne 4 years. He's tattooed himself. He's a walking shrine to the police officer he killed while she was sitting on her bike on the way to work one morning because the truck's brakes were faulty. The mechanical work was done by a bloke who wasn't a mechanic and the truck was overloaded. And you know those bastards that own the truck, Erms Transport, subcontracting to Civic Transport, are all out there just merrily going about life as normal. There's a dead woman, there's a family who've lost a loved one, and a truck driver is going through mental torture in jail.
Yep, the thing I'd add to that, Glenn, is that and this again I've seen over many years where a subcontractor signs, I won't call it a contract, I'll call it an agreement with a major company or a major freight user. Where he has to totally indemnify, who's the hirer, basically, he has to indemnify them against any offence. Yeah. Now that's over hours, over weights, regardless of whether he's seen it loaded or not. He turns up, his trailers are all locked up, he can't open them up and have a look how it's loaded. So whether it's overweight or whether they've got him out 3 or 4 hours late, still expecting to be at his destination at the same time, he's indemnifying them against prosecution. What happened to the chain of responsibility? Yeah, that's right, mate. I spoke to the minister, minister in Victoria, and anyway, there you go, mate. 30 years we've had this crap.
I just want to ask you one question. You said to actually keep the out of this meeting, just bring in the owner-drivers, keep the CEOs and lawyers out of it. What's your opinions about keeping unions out as well?
I think the unions, to a degree, Senator, they're a bit like us. Their hands are tied. Michael, what's his name?
Kane.
What's his name?
Kane.
Yeah, Michael Kane. Michael Kane sat in on those facilitation sessions, and they have an award to work with. That's all they can prosecute. They can only prosecute people that aren't paying the award rate.
Well, they can't even do that. They can't do that.
No, exactly. Fix the award. Fix the award. The problem solved.
Fix the award.
Fix the award. Yeah. Okay.
So, but sorry, Tim.
That's for employed drivers. Fix the award. Right. And I've heard a couple of guys earlier this morning talking about employed drivers and what have you, but they've got the same issues. The amount of work they've got to do to earn a good living, the number of hours they've got to work, and they're still under the gun in terms of prosecution.
Mm. Yes, that's right, mate. All right. I think now, Tim. Thank you, Pauline. Susan,
no, that's all for me. Thanks, Mr. Squires.
Tim, mate, can I just thank you very much for your input, mate? I really appreciate that, and it has cleared a few differences that we hear, but I did want the senators to hear because you were at the coalface. Mate, all the very best. Take care. Oh, hang on.
Senator Sterl, I think the evidence that Mr. Squires has given is really useful. We won't be able to use it in the submission without, because it's in camera. I wonder, Mr. Squires, you feel free to say no because you've obviously had reasons to ask for this evidence to be in camera, but would you consider allowing us to publish it, or do you think that it's too problematic for you?
I think, I was pleased to hear Senator Sterle talk about the differing views of the various associations now, Senator, but because I know how the tribunal is viewed by a number of people, and it was my concern that someone saw my name against that and just thought, oh yeah, he was one of those clowns on the tribunal that didn't know anything about what was going on. But that was the reason I asked for the in-camera session. If you want to use it, you use it.
Fantastic, Tim. Just on that too, mate, Linfox and Toll are back in the tent. I know. And, hey, I didn't pressure them. Put it this way. No.
Amazing, Glenn.
All right, mate.
All right.
Yep,
if there's anything else I can do, go out. You've got the phone number.
Tim, take care, mate. Thank you so much. All the best, mate.
Okay.
Bye-bye, mate.
See ya.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Right. Let's get back on. Thank you, everyone.
That was very beneficial for me to actually get a better understanding of it. I wasn't in Parliament at the time.
I was.
I
think the Labor government did a shit job. I think they did an absolutely terrible job.